Hello, I am B.M.R. Williams, and I'm filming this to give an update on my story of Princess Juliana. Um, it's probably been about a year since I made my last update video, and in that one, I was pretty much ready to give up writing entirely. And needless to say, I pulled through and I finished all of the note taking for part 7, and it was the well, it's still in production right now. It has been the longest section in production so far, with it being a work in progress for over a year now. Uh, to plan for part 7 took around 15 or 14 notebooks, so each notebook is 192 pages, so I can't do the math right now, but a few thousand pages of notes. Um, and currently the book itself is 70,000 words long, and it's about a third of the way done. The outline itself was about 60,000 words long, so it's quite a hefty section. Not as long as part 5, but definitely going to be longer than part 6. So it'll be the second longest section so far. And I'm also working on part 8 on the side. Then after that, all I have is part 9. And if nothing happens in my life that's too drastic and weird, I might see the book done 2026 maybe. So, 2 more years of development. If I get really busy and can't really dedicate as much time to it and energy, then maybe a little bit later. The thing is with writing this book is it's not so much of a time thing, it's more of an energy thing. Like I don't really spend as much time working on it a day as one might think, but that those few hours I do spend working on it takes so much energy. It's ridiculous. And in the past, I was very focused on trying to just write this thing as fast as possible. So I wrote all of book 1 in a single month, first draft, which turned out to be 150,000 words. So, uh, yeah, 150,000 word novel in a single month is kind of nuts. But I can't work like that anymore. I have to take it easy on myself because writing part 6 was so damaging to my mental process. It's not funny. It's not funny. I honestly wanted to quit. So far, writing part 7 isn't nearly as bad, but I haven't been working on it quite as long yet, and I'm taking it easy. Sticking to a 2 chapter quota or 4,000 words, which is manageable for me. It's still a lot, but 4,000 words a day is still quite a bit. But that's what I'm sticking with. I'm not rushing myself to finish it. And part 7 is a little bit different. It is much more allegorical, and there's a lot more symbolic meaning in a lot of what's happening. Um, but that's just how this book goes. Every section, the story transforms just a little bit, where by the end it'll be quite different. Um, but I'm writing it because I feel like it needs to be written, and I've been working on this story now for over 7 years. So we'll be approaching our 8th in 2025. Um, and over the years of working on it, it's definitely changed. My perspective of it has changed, and my perspective of the main character, Juliana, has changed dramatically. Um, she's growing within the story and also within me as well. Just how I see her as a person is always evolving. Um, and I don't want to get too personal about it because ultimately what other people see in the characters is a reflective reflection of themselves, and I don't want my the way I view them to be canon. So uh, that's probably best that I keep that to myself right now. Eventually, when people do read it, they'll decide for themselves what the characters mean to them, and maybe the characters will change for them as well as the story progresses. Because there's one thing about this story that is very evident is that it is about change. Um, all of the characters change quite drastically throughout the story. There really isn't a single one that doesn't completely evolve in some way. So, one thing that I've felt recently is that the world feels empty without it. And maybe that's a very an arrogant thing to say, but lately I look at people and I just realize that they don't have what I have, which is this story I'm working on. They don't have it. They don't know what it is. They don't have it in them yet. Maybe one day they will, and maybe when that happens, things will be a little bit better for people. Maybe the world will be a little bit better. I'm not really certain. Maybe no one will even ever know about it. But one thing I do know is that the people who find it are the people who are meant to find it, whether that's a few people or a lot of people. I don't think I care anymore. Um, but one thing remains consistent is that producing the story is extremely painful and extremely difficult. And it's not that I don't enjoy writing, I do. It's just, it's so hard and it's so much work and it's just, it takes so much energy that I just don't know if it's something I want to always do. And so I think about all the time that maybe after this is done, I might be done writing, or I'll take a very long break from writing stories. I don't think I'll ever be completely done writing stories, but uh, we'll see what happens, honestly. I mean, there's no end to the stories I can write. I could write, if I could write an endless amount of novels. I mean, there's no end. I mean, just the amount of like spin-offs I could write around this one story is ridiculous. If I really wanted to milk it, I might write the story of Yarwell, which is basically like a prologue almost, but it's not a prologue. It's its own thing. But of Princess Juliana is kind of built off of it. So you read when you read of Princess Juliana, you'll constantly read about the story of Yarwell, um, and you kind of learn more about his story as the book progresses. So uh, I might just make that its own book at some point. I'm not really sure what I want to do with it, but I do want to tell Yarwell's story in some form of narrative or another, not just being loosely mentioned here and there throughout of Princess Juliana. But I mean, there's just so much I could write. I mean, I've built this insanely in-depth world that I could just it, the content I could create is endless, but my energy isn't endless, and my patience to do it isn't endless. And a big part of, and probably the part of the problem is of Princess Juliana is just such a complex and long series. I mean, originally there was going to be one book that I thought I could crack out in like a month after writing Owl N, and then it kind of expanded into a trilogy, and it still is a trilogy technically, but it's so long it might as well be nine separate books, 9 or 7 separate books. So parts 1 through 3 are about 50,000 words each. 4 is 86,000 words. 5 is about 243,000. 6 is 160,000, and I'm estimating part 7 will probably be around 180 or so thousand words long. Part 8, it's still way too early to tell, but it'll definitely be over 100,000 words. I can tell you that. And part 9, I don't know. Part 9 will probably be shorter. Um, so it'll definitely be sold in separate and 7 to 9 separate volumes at first. And how I space that out, I don't know. I could just release one a year if I wanted to. If it's really popular, then I might just release the whole thing all at once. But I that's an uncertainty. So I'll probably be releasing them slowly over time. Um, One thing is interesting though is that the things I face in my life tend to be what the story ends up being about, almost as if the experience I'm gaining in my life is necessary in order to write the book. Like my own development as a person is shaping the book itself. So to me, the book is kind of like the story of my own development as a person. But I hope other people see it their own way. I guess there isn't really too much else to add to that, other than writing it is extremely difficult, and I'm going to keep working at it as best as I can. So I have not been doing much painting at all. Every year I do a little bit less painting, and I'm barely painting at all, which is fine because I can't do everything. I enjoy painting. I want to get back into it at some point in my life and, kind of pick up where I left off. I still do illustrate here and then, but the book has taken priority, and you know, for the past few years I've been kind of dumping a lot of energy into horsemanship, which is really important to me, which has made a lot of it's made an impact on the writing as well. Same with the martial arts. I mean, it all it all it all goes back to writing the book. Um, but honestly, the thing with the horses is it's like a massive distraction. Um, it kind of distract. I mean, it's not training horses is not easy by any means, and it kind of has its own form of suffering. I mean, in a way, it's a lot like writing the book. I mean, it's pretty lonely work, surprisingly. I mean, you're kind of out there in the middle of nowhere. It's just you and these animals. I mean, that's how it is for me, at least. I mean, there's no one out there, hardly ever, and it's pretty lonesome. I kind of went into that thinking that I would kind of have a little bit more company, but no, it's just being alone some more. Writing is just being alone all the time. I'm just kind of in my room by myself, thinking by myself. It's it's pretty hard. Um, but I think one of the things that made finishing book two so difficult was like it was just. I mean, book two is 450,000 something words. I mean, it is. I mean, that's massive. That is a massive book. Manuscript is 2,460 something pages, I believe. So, not a short book at all. I mean that. Um, and the amount of just suffering and just work that went into producing that. I mean, I finished it, and then that was it. There's just no celebration from anyone. There's not really a congratulations. I think the post on Facebook where I had mentioned that I finished it got like maybe 2 likes or something. Very anticlimactic for having produced something of that magnitude. But I mean, it'll receive its praise in due time. I'm not doing this for praise from anyone, but um, yeah, it kind of worries me because finishing book three will might only be worse because that's it. That's the whole thing. There is no there is no book four. There's no part 10. After that, that's it. A big part of it is grieving, saying goodbye to these characters in a way. Even though I'm still going to be working on it because I'll have to do second draft and I'll have to do third draft and blah blah blah. And I mean, they're going to be part of my life forever. But as far as writing the story goes, writing about the characters, writing scenes, that's going to be gone. And it's nice because I won't have to do it anymore. But it'll definitely feel like losing something. And I'm afraid of what those feelings will cause me to do to myself. Um, so hopefully I have a support group when that happens. Some something I can something that'll kind of save me from myself. It's it's it's, it's gonna be a rough one, probably for sure. Who knows? Or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I'll have matured a little bit more by then, and I won't care. But we will see what happens. One thing's for certain is that I am going to finish the book, no matter how difficult it is. The nice thing about painting is when you're illustrating a painting, you can kind of look at it. You can look at the whole thing right in front of yourself, and then you can kind of identify what needs work and what looks good, and you can kind of balance it out in real time because you have like a full picture of the whole thing. But writing a book, you don't have that. You just have this very tunnel visioned like view of what you're working on in that moment. And then you kind of just have to imagine the whole thing working together. But until it's all done, and like I have some beta readers and editors that can kind of like go through the whole thing, it'll be very difficult for me to really understand just what needs to get worked on. Um, I don't really think there's that much that's going to need to get worked on. Like I have a pretty refined process that ensures that I have a very good, strong outline before I even begin writing the book. Like I go through every scene so many times before I ever write the book. So through the note planning, through the compiling my notes, through the outline. So I go through every scene at least 3 times before I write it down into narrative with dialogue and all of that. So who knows? But and that's a very good way of doing things, I found. because it makes the actual writing process very easy. I can just enjoy writing the book, not worry about writer's block or any of that stuff. But bad part is it almost feels like I'm just kind of rushing through it almost like I don't really know how else to say it, but it's okay. First draft is just about getting words on paper. I can worry about it being good. Second draft, third draft, and fourth draft. There's no end to the amount of revision that I can do to this thing. Um, so first draft, just get the words down on the paper. That's the most important thing. Second draft, I'm going to install all of the changes, make sure everything works how I intend it to. The third draft, cleaning stuff up. And there's always going to be more drafts than that because you're always going to miss stuff. Yeah. So I have quite a bit of work ahead of me. But I have other avenues in my life. The horses, hopefully, that'll be something else. Because for basically all of my life, it's always just hinged on how well this book is going to do. Either it succeeds or it flops. But yeah, maybe the horse thing will be something else. I mean, I honestly would rather these days I would rather train horses and make money doing that. It's not easy and it's very dangerous work, but writing books is just fucking hard. It's tough. I mean, the whole thing's going to be about 1,000,000 words long. I don't need to say anything else. There's a lot of authors who have written way more than that, but I don't care. I mean, realistically, if I kept writing, I mean, like I said, there would be no end. There's a few other stories that I would like to get out there, but one of them being Cats with Lightsabers. That's Savers with a V, not Sabers. So I always it was always I always in my head it was Cats with Lightsabers, like the Star Wars lightsaber, but as a kid I always misspelled it Saver with a V. So it's officially canon that it's Cats with Lightsabers. Also because Saber lightsaber is copyrighted, so I can't use that even if I wanted to. I don't want to, honestly. I really want to produce that story at some point. I always thought I would finally get that one out there in my 30s or something. You'll see. I'll need people to help me with it because I don't want to go it alone. I'm not a comic book artist, so I'll need people who do comic books. And then, there's the story of Bathar, which is also a big one. Um, who knows? That was actually supposed to be the first book in my world, but I just didn't have the experience as a writer to produce it, and I hope to work that one out someday. And then, who knows? Maybe I'll also kind of just write like compendiums that just have all of my stories in there somehow. I mean, I literally have over 10,000 pages of handwritten notes, and you know, just over like I mean, just hundreds of thousands of words of stuff I've typed up as well. I mean, it's endless. It's ridiculous. It could feed me for multiple lifetimes. I would never run out of ideas ever. But yeah, I think that's just about everything I had to share. That's my update for 2024, going into 2025. Hopefully next year, I'll say something like I finished part 8 and I'm working on part 9 and seeing a release of book 1 in 2026. But one thing I do know for certain is anytime I try and predict a date to release this thing, I'm off. Like, so it's not even fun. Like, I honestly thought that this whole thing would be done like last year, maybe even the year before that. I'm not sure. Like, I had an original timeline in my head. I think I had like all 3 books done by 2022 or something. Yeah, right. No, I mean this thing is increased in complexity, scope, very much so. But yep, that's it. Thank you for listening. Peace.